When it comes to the concept of crunch, it has become a very murky topic when we talk about game development from a AAA to the independent space. But for today's industry insight, we're going to be discussing a little bit more about a recent piece that went up regarding the concept of crunch and what it really means as a developer or as anyone in the game industry. Now, if you don't know what the term means, crunch refers to the idea of working way beyond normal or acceptable hours on a project. It's typically a part of any kind of passion project or when you have a strict deadline. If a product or service that you've promised is going to be done by, let's say, October 30th, then it's going to get done on October 30th no matter what. And this can lead to people working way more hours than you would normally consider. As we know, the normal work week is about 40 hours. But when we talk about crunch, this can go into the 80, 100, and even sometimes even more than that of people just breaking themselves to get a product or a project done. And this has been a major part of game development, especially from the AAA studio. As we've talked about before, many people get into the game industry for the passion. Again, the ever popular, I want to make games for a living and I don't care what else happens. And this attitude has become heavily exploited by major studios. That idea that, oh, you want to go home after your 8-hour day? Well, obviously you don't care as much as John over here who's staying an extra 5 to 6 hours. And what happens when when a game is delayed or issues come up during game development that force the project to run long? This is when we see many studios tend to really crack down, sometimes near the end of the project and sometimes far earlier. And crunch is not good in this point. Again, the human body is not meant to work 100 plus hours a week non-stop. You're eventually going to break down. And there have been many studies about work-life balance and psychology that have released results saying that at some point, no matter how many hours you put into something, it's getting a negative return. Because if you're not working at 100% of your capability, then you're just pushing yourself beyond your limits. And this can cause everything from stress to health issues and even issues with your family when you're not able to go home and see your wife and kids for hours or days on end. And this is why a lot of people have spoken out against crunch. Famously, over the last decade, there was a discussion about EA Spouse, the anonymous wife of an EA employee who talked about the horrible working conditions that her husband had to face, and you would think that would be the end of things. But no, it hasn't. And it seems to have gotten worse, at least when we talk about the AAA side. The article or situation that's brought about this video comes from Rockstar Studios, the makers of course, the Grand Theft Auto series, and very soon Red Dead Redemption 2. And this is a studio that has certainly earned both a praise and negative reputation over the years. They have gotten a lot of recognition for making very high quality, very cinematic style games, but they've also been called out for poor labor conditions, issues regarding misogyny, and just not having a great culture or a great work culture. And what was reported as of earlier today, or for those of you watching this recorded yesterday, came from an interview that the owner of Rockstar Studios, whose name I'm going to quickly look up, Dan Houser, said about his studio, and said that they were working at least 100 hours a week during the final stages of the game to get it done. And a lot of people have called him out on that level of crunch. And then he said something even worse than that. And this is what it has to do with, the CEO of Take-Two said something else about this kind of issue, which I'll get back to in a second, because I want to stay on Rockstar for a second and Dan. When it comes to this level of crunch, this is again when we get to that point of why do people do this? And it's that level of exploitation that becomes very dangerous. Because As everybody knows, and as we talked about many times before, passion is blinding. When you're working on a product or a project that's going to define your professional or even your personal life for years to come, you're going to put 110% into it. And we see this especially in an independent scene where developers will keep pushing that project even if it looks like things aren't working right or they're going to cancel it. But no, it's their dream, it's their art. And the AAA publishers know how to exploit that. And this was a quote that the CEO of Take-Two Interactive said back in February. "We have a hard-working company. It's a privilege to work at our company and our labels, and I believe that our work practices are sound and appropriate. It is a very busy time, but it's a time that people are anxious to participate in, and I stand behind it." And that is the declaration that is given when developers and major studios try to justify crunch, that the people want to work. They are dedicated to this project. They want to get it to succeed. So why shouldn't they work an extra 30, 40, 50 hours a week if they believe in it? But the problem again is that at some point you are just pushing people beyond their limits. And this is a major part for the burnout rate when it comes to working in the game industry. Because if you've just spent the last 5 to 6 months of your life working 3 to 4 times the normal amount of hours for a full-time job, do you really want to do that a second or a third or a fourth time? I don't see too many people doing that. And then there is one greater discussion, then we're going to switch to some game footage. And that's the fact that crunch is usually not the sign that a project is going well. As we've said before, project and group management skills are typically a major failure point for a lot of studios, be them indie to AAA. And in a perfect world, no game or no project in general should require crunch. And when we talk about major studios of employees in the dozens or the hundreds, with millions and sometimes even billions of dollars being thrown around, these studios should not have to push their employees like that. There is no reason why a game like Red Dead Redemption 2 should require 100 hours of work to get done. It should get done when it gets it there. It's one of the things that a lot of people talk about with Blizzard. Blizzard doesn't care about release dates, and if a game doesn't hold up to their standards, they are more than happy to cancel it. But this is when the discussion takes a different turn, because we've been talking about things from a AAA studio. When somebody above you is coming down and asking you to work an additional 30 to 50 hours a week. But what about when you are your own boss? And for that, we're going to turn to a game that also earned some very interesting discussions regarding crunch. And now a quick shout out to the supporters over on patreon.com/GWBycer. This is obviously footage of Stardew Valley, one of the major names of the independent game success scene. And this is a game that took a very long time and a lot of work to make. In interviews, lead designer Eric Barone talked about spending at least 4 years and working at least 10 hours a day on Stardew Valley. And this is very much the idea behind a passion project. He wanted this kind of game to be available on PC. It wasn't available, so he decided to make it on his own. And this kind of underdog story is, again, something that many game sites and game journalists just eat up. But this is another case, again, of crunch in action. And this is when, like we said in the last part, the term or the connotation gets very muddied. Because when we're talking about independent developers, 1 to 5 man groups of people working, it's not so much a case of, the higher up demanding that you work on this project. For many independent groups, these are people who are working on games either as a part-time or part of their daily lives, or it's not going to get made otherwise. And again, something like Stardew Valley, nobody else was making a game like this. If Eric decided one day to just quit making Stardew Valley, there was no alternative of a game to play. And this is why he pushed himself for those 4 years. And we hear this from a lot of independent developers. I know Positech Games' Cliff Harris has talked about this many times on Twitter, that he is more than happy if he gets into the groove of working on a project to spend 10 to 12 hours a day doing coding or balancing his game because he's inspired. He wants to make this game. And this is again where things get very tricky when we talk about the concept of crunch. Because what happens when it's you deciding you want to work that long? Like for myself, I am up into the wee hours of the morning editing footage for videos, creating thumbnail art, starting to write posts for Game Wisdom, and so on and so forth. Nobody is coming in to tell me that you have to go to sleep now, or you need to stop working. And again, when we talk about projects at this scale, many people will use crunch essentially as a way of just continuing to push forward on that passion project. But at the end of the day, though, whether you are a major studio or just simply a 3-person group, you have to understand that any amount of crunch, it has its limits. And while you may feel fine working one day a few extra hours, or spending a little more time each day instead of just an 8-hour work period, but eventually it is going to wear on you. And when studios not only exploit but capitalize on crunch is when we get to some very malicious behavior. There is no AAA studio in the world that should be demanding people work an additional 30 to 40 hours a week. When you are making that amount of money, it should be more freedom. It should be more lax at that point because you're not having to worry about daily expenses like an independent studio. But as we all know, it is the opposite. When you are a small-time developer, when it's just you and maybe a few friends or just you yourself, you are free to do whatever you want. Do you want to spend 4 days a week working on a game? Do you want to spend all 7 days? Do you even want to just do this as a part-time, maybe like an hour a week? You are free to respond and behave however you like. But at the end of the day, crunch being praised or being considered a major part of the process is not good. If you want to work on a project extra, get that extra credit or continue to make progress, that is more power to you. But you cannot make that as part of your daily routine. Again, the human body has basic needs. You can't just tell yourself, oh, I'm only going to need 3 hours of sleep this week and let it be so. And for many developers who've pushed themselves using crunch as a justification or the passion of working on a project, this can lead to very dangerous outcomes. And again, everybody loves the underdog stories. They love to hear about developers rising up and achieving. But there are many stories that go unreported of people who just burn out or worse, suffer serious health conditions. And here's my final point for today's Industry Insight, and we'll wrap it up here. There is not one game on the market or will ever be available that is worth hurting people over, be it through pushing them beyond their normal working conditions. A good game is a good game, but I don't care how great it is. If it costs an entire department health issues or worse, driving people out of the industry, then it was not worth it. And even something as prestigious as Red Dead Redemption 2 or any other game from Rockstar still doesn't justify crunch. And like I said, at the end of the day, if you are a major studio with employees in the dozens or the hundreds, you need to have somebody responsible managing the project. Because it should never get to the point that you need a 100-hour work week. Even if you're trying to make the game better, it is far more healthy just to push that release date back. Which again, I know many studios will argue, but we need to get it out for that specific time period. But again, is it really worth the health and potential careers of your employees? And I think for people watching this, you probably know what answer I'm going to give. But with that said, let's wrap things up for today. Hopefully our next video will be a little bit happier, but we'll see. But thank you so much for tuning in. Check back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Until next time, have a good night. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel link down below where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.